Welcome back to Paul's Pod. Today we are joined by a very, very, very special guest, someone who is one of the most respected figures in the fight game, boxing Hall of Famer, UFC Hall of Famer. It is the one and only Marc Ratner. How are you, Marc? You okay?
Good, Paul. Nice to talk with you again. I always like to hear from my friends in London, in England. So great.
Well, it's always a pleasure to speak to someone like you, Marc. I mean, I met you back in March for UFC London, the first March card that we had in, I think it was the first card in 2 years that the UFC had come back
Yeah, I
after the
believe so.
pandemic. So, and since, I mean, look at the way the UFC has exploded since coming back from the pandemic. And I mean, the British talent that has risen through this year has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I bet you guys are just so glad to see the UK market finally, I think, reaching its full potential of really having a full run of contenders throughout many divisions.
Yes, we just had the Allen kid fight last Saturday. He was tremendous.
He was. I mean, all Alan. I mean, wow. I think he's due a title shot soon. I can't lie. I think, featherweights. Especially with Volkanovski maybe going and fighting against Makachev. I think that's a fight that a lot of UK fans will want to see. But today, I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your story, and I think it's best. Let's go back to right at the beginning. What's it? I mean, you were born in Arizona, but you grew up basically born and bred in Las Vegas. What was it like to grow up in Vegas?
Well, back then it was this was in the late '50s, very small town, maybe 50,000 people, and just a few hotels. And growing up here, regular, I went to a junior high school, or grade school, high school, and college in Reno. So it was like any other town. The strip was there, but we didn't go out on the strip that much.
And growing up, obviously, Sin City became what it was, and the biggest fights came to Vegas. And what was it like growing up with being such a big sports fan and having the best fights happening in your hometown? Really, I mean, how much of an impact did that have on your life?
Well, I used to go when I first heard some of these big fights were coming. And this is from early '60s on. I would go buy tickets and try to buy the top row, the cheapest ticket. When Floyd Patterson fought Sonny Liston here, which was, I believe, in 1963. I bought the first ticket sold. In those days,
Wow.
uh, you would you'd have to get in line to buy tickets for rock and roll and stuff. And I remember tickets were going on sale at 9 o'clock. And I got there about 7:30. I was the only one in line, and I bought four $10 tickets, which I still have one of them for.
Oh, wow. I bet that's a nice piece of memorabilia.
Yeah, a great piece. And the fight lasted 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and Floyd got knocked out. And Sonny Liston went on
And the
to,
rest is history.
yeah, that's exactly right.
So, you growing up, you did business management at university. So, you've always kind of, I can imagine, had a bit of a business mind to things. And, when did you realize that you wanted to, have an actual real importance in the fight game? Like, when did you know you wanted to be involved in the fight game, and how did it come, a part of you working with the Nevada
In
Athletic
about,
Commission?
uh, I never had any urge to work in boxing, but different boxing people would see me at fights. There was a little small arena called the Silver Slipper, but I was also involved in college basketball, so I knew a lot of people, and they said, "We see you at the fights. Why don't you apply to be an inspector and learn about the fights? You'll be able to get into the fights. You'll get to work in the back rooms." And that was a great job for me. No matter who the fighter was, to be involved. My big thrill was working in Ray Leonard's corner when he fought Marvin Hagler, and I was the inspector in his corner. So,
And, I mean, what was going through your mind the first time you ever worked on something like that?
oh, how much I didn't know! I didn't know all the stuff, and we had to go to a. There was a famous trainer named Johnny Toko, who was Sonny Liston's trainer at one time. He had a gym here, and he showed us how to wrap hands, how to do it legally and illegally, and some of the cut solutions that were illegal. And we just didn't know everything, and so it was a great learning time for me. but to be in the back rooms was a good foundation for me.
And I guess as well at the time, things were completely different to what they are now. I mean, how much of it was changing at the time that you were starting to get involved? Like, was it, because I feel like, especially the last 10 to 15 years, sports in general has had like a pretty rapid change. But was it kind of, the old ways was how it was all done for a long time, or how was it?
Well, there was a lot of that this is the way it was done, and we were starting to get, especially in the '70s. We had, besides Hagler Leonard, we had Hearns and Leonard and Duran, and so it was a wonderful time to be involved, whether it was Hagler, Duran, Leonard, or Tommy Hearns. So yeah, I got to live through all those fights and be part of them, and that was a very exciting time for me.
So how did you get to, working on the commission? How did that come about? How were you approached, or?
Uh, the executive director was named Chuck Minker, and he contacted a rare form of lung cancer. I was his chief inspector then. This was in the late '80s. Made me the chief inspector, and he passed away in 1992. And the five-man commission and the governor, they said, "You want to be executive director? Well, we would like you to be the executive director." So I became the director in 1992 and stayed there until 2006.
And when you had the opportunity to become the executive director, I mean, what was going through your head then? Was there any doubts in your mind? I mean, I feel like I know what you're going to say. That obviously probably wouldn't, but was there any nerves, or were you just so comfortable because of how long you'd already been involved by that point that you kind of, yeah, you were like, yeah, I'm confident, I know what I'm doing.
Well, I had a pretty good idea of what the job entailed, but there was a lot I didn't know about stuff with the state government and doing payroll stuff as well as having minutes and having meetings and sort of. But I had a good staff who taught me a lot, and yeah, so it felt comfortable. But I had a lot of for all the great moments. We also had people who died when I was there in boxing. So that sobers you up and just makes you realize it's a tough sport. It's a dangerous sport, and you have to do everything possible about the health and safety of the fighters.
And being in that sort of role and position as well, I can imagine there's a lot of, even like the responsibility in a way does come down to you in terms of every, like I said, the health and the safety. I mean, was that pressure ever, you know did it ever put you off, or did you just
So
enjoy the thrill of it all, or?
when somebody gets fatally hurt, it just first of all you have to reach out to the families and go to the hospital. It was very tough times, and I try not to think about it too much, but I was involved in a few of them, and I don't know if we would have changed anything, but uh, it's just part of the sport. And knock on wood, it hasn't happened here for a long time. And it seems like even around the world, it's not quite as much, but get hit in the head too much, and sometimes some people can take it. Sometimes they have a subdural hematoma, and the brain blows up more or less. So you just got to do
Well,
everything you can.
the fight game is not any it's not for the faint-hearted. The fight game is a very, very serious sport, unfortunately, stuff like that does happen, but I think, we're in an age where things, especially medically, and the amount of science and research there is, I think we're fortunate enough that the sports have grown with everything. So yeah, Mike Tyson, what a character. You had the opportunity to be working in and around the famous Mike Tyson era. What was
Right?
that like to be in and around the era of Mike Tyson?
Well, he was always very cool with me personally, and I was the face of the commission, and I was the one who had to say that we're finding you $3 million. We're going to hold your purse, and But no, what I really remember was before the fights when he would warm up, you'd have to be in the dressing room bringing the gloves or something. You had to almost flatten yourself against the wall because he warmed up so hard and threw so many punches. I remember he was uh, one of his trainers was a guy named Richie Giacchetti, and probably weighed 250. This Richie and Tyson's punches would he would hold the mitts and would lift him off the ground. This was before the fights, so no, it was there was a factor that made you want to see him fight. And I think what I liked was he came out with no robe, just a little towel over his head, no socks, black trunks, and there was no feeling out period. He came to fight.
Just
And
straight to the business.
right.
I mean, a lot of people look back at that era of boxing as kind of like the golden age of boxing. The 80s and the 90s. I mean, what do you think about the state of boxing currently? I mean, do you think that that time period can never come back? I mean, obviously it can never be the same, but do you think a golden age of boxing per se can reappear?
Well, it's all about the fighters fighting the right fighters at the right time, and so there's there's different promoters, there's different networks. But the best example would be Earl Spence and Terence Crawford, a fight that everybody wants to see. Two of the pound for pound best fighters in the world, and they've never fought each other. It doesn't look like they're going to fight each other. Maybe next year, and that's what's a shame. I wanted to see Pacquiao fight Floyd. Money Mayweather probably a couple years before they did fight. That would have been great. Uh, the advantage with the Hagler, Leonard, Hearns, Duran time was I think they were all under the auspices of Top Rank, or he could make deals with other promoters, uh, and that's real important. But with competing networks, competing promoters, we're not getting the fights that we should get. And Tyson Fury is as good as a heavyweight that maybe any of them. His his history is unbelievable. He weighs comes in around 285, 290, and he would have been a problem for almost any heavyweight. I hope that he fights soon again, whether it's Anthony Joshua or even Wilder again. Uh, it's but I want to see him fight, and probably he'll fight in London again and get 90,000 people.
Yeah, so he's actually got a next. His fight next is I think December 3rd. He's fighting Derek Chisora again,
Right.
which I mean, as a British boxing fan, I think as a kind of boxing fan anyway, the Chisora fight, it doesn't really interest anyone, I don't think, at least,
No,
because
no,
they've already
party
fought
people.
twice. Both those fights weren't close at all.
Right.
And, you've got fighters like Joe Joyce who probably deserve a title shot more than Derek Chisora. I think Derek Chisora has lost half of the last 14 of his fights. You've also got Usyk that's out there.
Yeah.
AJ, like you said, wow. I mean, these fights are so much more interesting than a Derek Chisora trilogy, rather.
Yeah. Usyk he's a tremendous fighter. He doesn't get enough credit. So that would be fun to see all. But they need to fight each other, and the money's so big, and most of these fighters don't have to fight more than once a year, and that's a tough part too. But
Yeah, I
boxing is
know.
the most resilient of all sports, and people would say, well, after Muhammad Ali, the fights will never be the same. But yet there's always fighters coming up. Uh, after De La Hoya and Trinidad, look at we've got a lot of good welterweights now, a lot of good middleweights. So sport is it's doing fine.
I think, you're always going to have as well people always kind of looking back to the greats. So, and it's always hard to compare as well because it's different generations and
Right.
there's just a lot of variables that get involved. But you were ringside for many, many obviously famous moments, but I think two very bizarre moments in the boxing world at least was the fan man moment and the Tyson bite.
Right.
What was going through your head in both of those moments?
Well, the Fan Man, which I believe happened in 1993. So now you're talking 30 years ago. Uh, what I remember is more than anything, a couple things. First of all, I didn't know. that this, I call him an intruder, was circling outside of Caesars in the sky. And I guess people could see him, but I was intent on watching the fight sitting ringside. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of the darkness, comes this guy with a parachute, and uh, with his he lands with his feet over the ropes. Uh, if it would have happened in 2003, we would have thought it would have been a some kind of a terrorism attack. It would have been a horrible thing. I always want to give credit to Michael Buffer for keeping the crowd calm, because it could have really gotten out of hand. The lucky part for the ringside people and the fans was when the parachute got stuck on the ring lights, it didn't pull them down, which would have been a real disaster. People really would have got hurt. But the other memory there was a 21-minute delay in the
Wow,
seventh
I didn't
round,
realize it was that long.
and a couple of mistakes that I look back on. I should have sent the fighters back to their dressing rooms. I told that to Evander last year, and so that they had to put blankets on them, but we didn't know if the fight would start again. We just didn't know. And my first thought that night was, I went right to the timekeeper and said, how much time is left in the round? That was important. I knew I had to know that. And then I went to each judge and said, turn your scorecard over and make a note. Who do you think's winning right now? And if this fight continues, we're going to have to judge this round. So the round was a 21-minute delay. The irony is that one judge gave the fight to Riddick Bowe, one gave it to Holyfield, and one called it 10-10. If that judge who had it 10-10 would have given it to Riddick, then it would have been a majority draw, and Riddick would have kept the title. So it did change the course of heavyweight history.
It's crazy how the weirdest circumstances will have such a big impact on history, really.
The bike fight, now we're talking about 1997, so it's 25 years ago. Uh, all of a sudden, now I believe it's the third round, I see Holyfield jumping up and down. And I thought maybe that Mike had kneed him, maybe his cup had somehow pinched him or something. I did not know there was a bite. Then referee Mills Lane, one of the top referees in the history of the sport in the world, called me over on the ring apron and said, he bit him, I'm going to disqualify him. And I said, which we do in other sports, I just said to him, are you sure you want to disqualify him? You want to think about it? Something like that. Anyway, Mills Lane called me up, and he said, I'm going to bring the ringside doctor in. And it's Dr. Flip Homansky. He looked at Evander's ear, and he said he could go on. And then Mike did it again, and I wonder to this day, if Mike would have knocked out Evander after the first bite, then you wouldn't be talking to me today, because I would have been blamed for letting the fight go on. So another irony there.
Well, I mean, just to be involved in, the magnitudes of these fights, I think that surely that must hold such a special place in your heart.
It's a lot more fun 25, 30 years later to talk about them than that night.
I can imagine.
But no, and when I see Mike, I see him at fights, or sometimes he comes here to visit Dana White. He's very sweet, so he seems in a good spot
Well,
right now.
yeah, I mean, I think he's had such a wonderful journey. I think, Mike being in the spotlight the way he was and all those troubles that he had, especially after Cuss died, I think it took him a while to seem like he's had like peace with himself, but I think
Right?
it's lovely to see, and he's such a smart guy, such a smart individual, and a lot of people kind of overlook how intelligent he actually is, just
Yeah,
because
very
a lot of
streetwise,
people
but
probably
he knows the history of boxing so well too.
very clued up. But speaking of the main man, Dana White, when
Yes,
was the first time you met Dana and the Fertitta brothers?
uh, Lorenzo was a commissioner uh, for the state of Nevada at the Athletic Commission. So I had met him in the probably in the mid '90s. Uh, I also referee high school American football, and then he was a football player, so he said he remembered me from refereeing. Dana, uh, I got to know because he was a fight fan, is a fight fan. He would come to some of the boxing, and I never thought about leaving the athletic commission. I thought I had the best athletic commission job in the world. And Lorenzo approached me in 2005 and said, "Have you ever thought about leaving?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, we might have an opportunity for you. Let's talk again." And then we talked again in early 2006, and this time he brought Dana. And I like to say that Lorenzo is the salesman, but Dana would be the closer. And
Yeah.
I decided I would come over, and it was May of 2006, and I haven't looked back since.
Was it ever, at the time, especially the UFC back in those days, it was still kind of like a almost a frowned upon thing that a lot of people didn't really want to approach. I mean,
Right.
the coming from the magnitude and the stature of where you were in the boxing world, was there ever, maybe not so much a worry, but just were you ever worried about leaving what you had created, kind of your legacy in boxing? Was there ever maybe a worry that that might be tainted, or?
Uh, it was interesting when it was first announced, and somehow somebody heard about it. It was in the papers before I had said much,
Mm.
and I had a lot of boxing people tell me that you're making a big mistake. You betrayed the sport, which made no sense, and he said, once you leave, you can't come back. You're making a big mistake. So those same people, when I see them today, said you made the right decision. But when I first talked about it with my wife, she said, well, at least get a 3-year contract. So that was part of the deal, and we got a 3-year contract, and it must roll over every year because I never signed another one. So now, now I've been here 16 years. So
And I mean, you are someone that really, really helped build. Obviously, I know you're very humble, and I know that you always say that there's a big group of people that were involved. But I mean, you
we,
had a massive impact on, getting the UFC to where it is right now. I mean, what's it been like to literally see the company grow like almost like your own little baby to see where it is now?
well, in 2006, we had around 19, 20 states that approved the sport. And as you said, much more than me, many others. But we would hopscotch around the country, going to state capitals and legislatures, and one by one we would have it approved. And then it took us to the big spot in New York. Excuse me. It took us over 8 years to get the sport approved. It was not about MMA as much as about some
Politics.
union problems in Nevada that carried over to New York. And finally, the speaker he was voted out of office, taken out of office, and we were able to get a vote in 2016. Had a fight in November of that year with Eddie Alvarez and with Connor, and that was
It was
the proud
205.
moment for me. That was real important because I went to the weigh-in and saw it was 18,000 people at the weigh-in. Fights the next night over that, and that was like seeing the baby finally being born. That was a big night for me.
Would you say the whole 8 years and the whole getting it regulated in New York, and like I said, was that even your proudest? Granted, was that also one of probably your hardest challenges in your career?
Yes, I would say that. So I went to Albany, New York, probably 29, 30 times, just meeting with different legislators. And but as I look back now, it was all worth it. New York's a huge market. We're going there next Saturday night, and with Israel and Pereira, and it's going to be a huge fight. We'll have a big, big crowd there, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Who are you most excited to see fight? I mean, I probably know you might not have an opinion. being a bit unbiased, but I mean, do you, going into every fight, I guess you're the same. Every single fight excites you from top to bottom.
Yeah, I don't have a favorite. I enjoy watching different people fight, but I just watch the fights, and yeah, whoever wins wins. Now there's controversy, and then I have to get involved with the judges or something. The referee stops it too early or too late. But no, I just look forward to a good fight. I'm hoping that Connor comes back early next year and John Jones comes back. There's just a lot of great fights to be made, and I'm looking forward to that.
You've worked on thousands of fights, probably. It's got to be in the thousands. Are there any particular fights that, stick out in your mind, boxing or UFC, that you've either worked on or even just as a fan?
Well, in boxing, I mean, there's many, but the Hagler Hearns 3 rounds of hell, I mean, it's unbelievable. Uh, no, I've seen a lot of big fights and the big controversies I was involved in. I got to see Ray Robinson at the end of his career. One of my favorite fighters. Uh, Actually, when you talk about these fighters, Floyd Money Mayweather could have fought in any era, I believe. He is so hard to hit solid, and I enjoy watching him fight. There, there was a Mexican fighter that I really liked. He passed away really early in a car wreck named Salvador Sanchez, so I got to see him. So I've seen a lot, and then that's why when I see the Tyson Furies or the Spences and Crawfords, the fight game is still evolving, and these guys are a little physically better than they were. Maybe not boxing wise, but certainly nutrition wise. As far as MMA goes, I've seen a plethora of big fights, and one of the best probably was Alex Gustafsson and John Jones. It's 5 rounds, unbelievable. Uh, I've really enjoyed just recently the Peter Yan fight.
That was an amazing fight.
Just amazing, and for Sean to win that fight, close fight, was he had to dig deep, and he proved himself. So yeah, Khabib, unbelievable, his stuff. So yeah, now this sport is changing continually. You're getting guys who are starting to fight at 9 and 10 years old, not at 15, 20 years old. So these fighters are getting better and better.
It's crazy to think how much history the UFC has, considering how long it's only been, because it's still a very new sport,
Brand new, yeah.
brand
1993 was
new.
the first year.
And it's even crazier to think how much further the sport can evolve, considering how, like, right now you could think, wow, it's never been at the peak that it is right now, and it just seems like you say that at the end of every year. At the end of every year, you go, wow, that was an amazing year. How can it get better? And it just does it every year.
But the sport is hot right now. There's no getting around that. We've had 24, 25 sellouts in a row around the world, uh, including Abu Dhabi. And New York, I'm sure, will sell out before it's all done. Uh, I think the next frontiers will be. We just went to France, which was wonderful in September. I believe that whether it's next year or after, Johannesburg will be a spot. I think that South Africa or the whole continent of Africa will be in play. There's a lot of the world out there, and the Eastern Europeans, there's all kinds of good fighters, and we're just scratching the surface. And I think we're opening a performance institute in Mexico City. I think you'll see a lot more Mexican fighters. Yeah, I just keep seeing the UFC and MMA just keep growing.
How much of a challenge is it to, set up a UFC event in a continent like Africa compared to other continents?
Well, we'll have we have a system whether we go to Paris or we go to London. South Africa will be different because we'll have to get some local people there, but we have a staff that travels, and we'll get the right people in place. Uh, when you watch one of our fights, everything's the same. People sit at the same spot. I'll be at the same spot. Dane will be at the same spot. The inspectors will know where to go. So we have a formula down, and if and when we go to Johannesburg, but we'll have to get some people involved there. There's more amateur MMA stuff going on there now, and I look forward to that day. It's a long trip from here, though. I don't know if it'll be for me, but it'll be a big. We have three African fighters right now, so.
So you touched up before, not long ago, on Floyd Mayweather. I'd love to get your opinion on, all these kind of influencer boxing events that are kind of going on, all these legends that are coming out of retirement. We saw Anderson Silva at the weekend fight Jake Paul. What's your take on it all?
Well, first of all, I give credit to Jake Paul and some of the stuff because he's got so many. He's bringing attention to boxing, positive or negative. Uh, he hasn't fought a real fighter. Anderson Silva, if he'd have fought him at 40 instead of 47, might have given him a better battle. Uh, but I give credit to Anderson, and uh, whether it's Woodley or Van Askren, or these guys he's fought, they're all making a good payday. So more power to them. I'm happy for them. Uh, Floyd, he's doing these exhibitions and he's getting tens of millions of dollars. You can't blame him. Uh, People will pay to do that. I'm more of a boxing purist when it comes to this, but I can see I understand the social media part, and if people can make money doing it, then God bless them.
Do you think there's ever maybe a worry when you've got these guys that have competed and dedicated their entire life to training in such a brutal sport, the damages they would have taken in training and in fights? Is there maybe a limit for these guys that, should there be maybe, even if they're not professional fights, maybe like an independent regulator that's kind of stopping these guys that are maybe too far out of retirement to come out?
Yeah, it would be very hard to stop anybody that want to do it. We don't have a national commission, but they get around it because they say they're exhibitions. I didn't want to see a Mike fight Roy Jones, that kind of stuff. But no, they.
Try telling Mike Tyson no.
The thing that sometimes when they say they're exhibitions, these guys are fighters first, and when you get hit, it's not an exhibition anymore because you're going to hit back, and so there's a danger to it. I don't want to see I don't want to see a mid 50-year-old Evander fight anymore, or Riddick Bowe come out of retirement. The money is a big draw, but I don't know if you can stop them either. But yeah, I'm concerned about that.
So, what ran through your mind when you were told that you were going to be not only inducted in the Boxing Hall of Fame, but also the UFC Hall of Fame?
Both of them. First of all, as I mentioned in boxing, I had so many people tell me I was making a mistake. I never thought about the Hall of Fame, and then I heard that I was going to be on the ballot, and then I thought for sure I would never get the votes. And then Ed Brophy from the Hall of Fame said, he called me up and said, congratulations. And I was shocked. Uh, so I had my whole family there and brother-in-laws and stuff. It was a very surreal. It's a very hard speech for me to do. When I got up to make my speech, I had to not step on them, but there was, I think it was Hagler, Duran, and Leonard. I had to step right over them almost to get to the lectern. And then I was thinking to myself, man, what am I doing here? Look at this. These are some of my idols. So that was a little overwhelming. For the UFC, once again, I was just sitting there, and we were all wearing masks. It was at our Apex, and I remember one of our legal guys, Hunter, who makes all the fight deals. So take off your mask for a minute. Uh, you look like you're hot, and something, I don't know. So then this video came on. I could see a wall where all my credentials were on it. And then all of a sudden they said, Hey, Marc, congratulations! You're a new member of the UFC Hall of Fame, and that was yeah, that was tearful. Uh, what they did, which really was shocking, this was during COVID, so they had got a hold of my wife and my two children and had them COVID tested without my knowledge, and they were standing behind me, so I didn't know they were there or anything. So yeah, it was very good. And at my induction, uh, I didn't really have to say a word because Lorenzo and Lawrence Epstein, the two of my favorite people, were the ones who introduced me, and you can't get better than that.
I bet that's so powerful, knowing that everything that you've put into your life's work is kind of obviously everyone knew and everyone knows how well respected you are, but to kind of just have that like the icing on the cake to actually be involved in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that must be so special.
Very special. Yes.
I mean, you've achieved so much in the fight game, you know, more than what so many people could even dream of achieving. At your point in your career now, what kind of still gets you out of bed and challenges you to set new challenges to yourself?
Well, working with these different commissions, talking to the New York Commission, just making sure everything goes smooth, still a big part of it. Uh, and then this Paris took a few years too, so that was a big challenge for us. And we'll go back there next year. Uh, yeah, the day-to-day stuff is keeps me busy, and then I have other things, whether it's high school sports or the American NFL football. I'm involved a little bit in that. So yeah, I still like to go to some boxing matches when we're free. So I keep myself busy. Yes,
Are you a fan of soccer at all?
I am. The Premier League is unbelievable, and when I was in London, the one you sort of alluded to, I was at Tottenham Stadium for an NFL game with the Packers and the Giants, and I was doing my job in the NFL, running the clocks and being involved. So that was very cool for us to be invited to London just for a couple of days, and Tottenham Stadium was gorgeous. I really was impressed with that.
It's probably the best stadium in the UK, to be honest, right now. The only thing that's missing from it is a roof.
Yeah, and I think that they like that. Uh, Not a lot of parking around there. I noticed that. It's right in the middle.
No, you're not going to find a lot of parking in London.
Yeah, a lot of trains I saw going in, but they had 60,000 people. And last Saturday at Wembley or Sunday, I think they had over 80,000. So American football is making inroads there, but soccer is still
American
the
football is huge in England. It is really, really big. I mean, watching the UFC at 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning is tough enough for me. So I feel like it's hard for me to stay up any later for any other sport. But I mean, I like my basketball, but again, the timing of it in the UK is so it's
right.
not it's a bit more difficult. But you're lucky, like the Premier League is on about 9 o'clock in the morning in the States, and you can wake up and watch some football. Have you got a
Right.
particular team that if you were to follow anyone that you'd watch?
In the soccer,
Yeah.
uh, I think I like Liverpool.
Oh no, I'm a Manchester United fan.
Yeah, Man City, Man U. A lot of foreign investment in these teams. American investment, Saudi Arabian investment. So it's an interesting time. But they got big TV contracts, and it's becoming more and more popular. The indoor soccer is becoming very, very popular. And there'll be some friendlies here with either Chelsea or Man U. They'll all come to Vegas eventually.
I'm sure of it. Well, Marc Ratner, the legend of the fight game, the man that without him the UFC would not be where it is. Thank you very much for joining my podcast, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. And the UFC would have got there eventually. I'm just happy to be part of it. So,
As humble as they come. Appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
all right. So long.